We also have some headlines actually just crossing on the Fed right now. Dow Jones reporting that Paul Winfree from the Heritage Foundation is under consideration for a Fed post. Dow Jones saying Winfree has confirmed that he has been contacted by the White House about a possible nomination. We know the White House has a few of those to make now. Let's bring in Steve Liesman. Steve, does Winfree work in the administration already? Doesn't he advise President Trump?
Yeah, he was in charge of various jobs on domestic policy inside the White House, which it's pretty normal to take somebody who's worked inside the White House. I believe Bernanke worked as CEA chair for a while there for George Bush. And you've seen this before where people come work inside the White House and then they go over to the Fed. So that's not an issue, I think, at all.
What do you think about this pick? I mean, I'm not sure, but it seems like he might be less controversial than a Steve Moore or a Herman Cain, maybe less baggage.
I think back on the spectrum is what I would say. Let's go back, Sarah. The Trump administration has had a lot of controversial appointments, appointing people who didn't really agree with the mission of the agency. When it came to the Fed, the Trump administration was very much like other administrations in terms of going through a very deliberate vetting process, finding people who were acceptable to markets and to the mission of the agency. The president sort of abandoned that with Moore and Cain. It feels a little bit like he's back on the, I don't know, the reservation or back on the plan here in terms of going back to how we did it before. Nothing, I mean, I don't know Paul Winfree. I looked up his bio. London School of Economic, Masters of Science, worked inside the administration on domestic policy, has written about how to eliminate Obamacare and about it's been a bit of a budget hawk or deficit hawk. But none of that is disqualifying. It was some of the other issues the other candidates had that caused people to say, wait a second. And you have to ask yourself a question, Sarah. Why should an appointment like this be controversial for the president? Why should he have to expend even an ounce of political capital putting a guy on the Federal Reserve Board or a woman?
But Steve, just to your point there on the past candidates that are no longer being considered, if we take Moore, for example, what was it, do you think, that scuppered his chances? Was it the Trumponomics, potentially too close to the president aspect, or was it the more wildcard comments, for example, that he made on women's role in the workplace? Because I guess that does raise the question whether there is somebody else out there that the president could successfully get appointed that would toe the line he wants on Trumponomics and being relatively close to the president in terms of a phone call away.
Right. I mean, I think that's an excellent question. There were some people who said they were not happy that Moore was disqualified for his writings about women rather than his unqualification in terms of monetary policy. The idea was that I think for a lot of people who follow the Fed or cover the Fed or in the markets, was Moore's problem was that he wore his politics on his chest rather than other Fed officials or Fed appointees who have worn them more on their sleeve. Everybody's political in some way or another. The question is, what is your primary role here? And the idea was that it was seen as a major litmus test, Will. Could the president put a person who was first and foremost a political supporter and put him on the Fed for that reason rather than some other expertise he or she may have?
But I don't think that's why he had to withdraw. I think he had to withdraw because it became politically untenable to get Senate confirmation after some of what he's written, which was highly offensive for women. I
think you're right about that, Sarah. No, I agree with you on that, but I'm just saying the way that people who follow the Fed, their concerns with Stephen Moore's. Yeah. I think your analysis of that is correct. He did withdraw likely because of the writing, and that caused the Senate to buckle.
Yeah. Winfree, I agree, Steve, not really known that much outside of conservative policy circles, really a think tank kind of guy, but we will go back and read his every writing. Steve Liesman, thank you very much.
I've read a few. They're interesting.
Yeah.
I've read a few. They're interesting commentary. They're worth reading.